Yeah, well, we can talk about the NEV sales. The numbers that stood out for me are the steep drop in internal combustion engines vehicle sales. Not only the German automakers, but the entire industry. 50% drop in domestic internal combustion engine sales. This number stood out to me for the reason that I couldn't remember of all of my years covering the Chinese auto industry and yours as well. In a month, that internal combustion engine vehicle sales dropped by half. Hence, we saw the numbers reported by Porsche, Mercedes, BMW Group, Volkswagen Group. So that's where we begin with. It's more serious than what many expected at the beginning of the year.
And who does this advantage? Number one, the top of mind comes to BYD. They don't build any ICE vehicles, as you and I know. Chery, Geely, they have some recalculating to do on their mix because a drop of 50% in ICE sales is still going to be a significant absolute number of ICE sales for China. Not for China, but it's still going to be entire markets for other countries. So we're still talking sales of ICE vehicles in the millions. But from its peak to now, the drop is enormous. Welcome to the China EVs More podcast, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will, in the next hour or so, bring you the latest news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I read a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at Sino Auto Insights. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good evening from Beijing. Yes, this is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. Episode
晚上好.
253, 早上好. We've passed midpoint of 2026. The sales number are coming in.
Let's focus on overall sales numbers, what we think, a couple of companies to highlight and lowlight. One of them in Germany just had a board meeting yesterday. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about that first week in Beijing, what you've been able to do and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the NEV sales. The numbers that stood out for me are the steep drop in internal combustion engines vehicle sales. Not only the German automakers, but the entire industry. 50% drop in domestic internal combustion engine sales. This number stood out to me for the reason that I couldn't remember of all of my years covering the Chinese auto industry and yours as well. In a month, that internal combustion engine vehicle sales dropped by half. Hence, we saw the numbers reported by Porsche, Mercedes, BMW Group, Volkswagen Group. So that's where we begin with. It's more serious than what many expected at the beginning of the year.
And who does this advantage? Number one, the top of mind comes to BYD. They don't build any ICE vehicles, as you and I know. Chery, Geely, they have some recalculating to do on their mix because a drop of 50% in ICE sales is still going to be a significant absolute number of ICE sales for China. Not for China, but it's still going to be entire markets for other countries. So we're still talking sales of ICE vehicles in the millions, but from its peak to now, the drop is enormous.
And I also seen a trend of these German automakers who are reporting numbers in the title of their press releases. They're reporting sales are up outside of China. It's also the first time I've seen that's the way that they are now reporting. And the common phrase that are used, intense competition, given in the press releases.
Lei, if they would have just listened to me like 6 or 7 years ago, but anyways.
And exports, right? Export, important to point out, is over 5 million autos exported in the first half.
We're at a 1 million unit a month run rate.
First time in June ever that monthly auto export from China went above 1 million units. 4 or 5 years ago, it was 1 million units a year. That's how drastic the structure has changed just in the last few years. And I was looking at some numbers. So out of all the auto export, NEV export accounts for roughly half. And out of the auto sales, the auto export accounts for roughly 30% to a third.
ICE sales are being exported to Russia, to Mexico or Latin America, to likely like Africa and some parts of Europe. But I think we're going to start to see that mix go further into NEV space. I want to see what the knock-on effects of BYD capacity outside of China coming online, Great Wall capacity coming online, Chery capacity, Leapmotor capacity, all coming online outside of China, because it doesn't help the Chinese domestic market with their overcapacity. One of the big reasons exports is growing is because, number one, the competition in China is fierce. Number two, the growth number is flattening out. And so continuous pressure. And the Chinese government is actually pulling away incentives and are trying to normalize the market. It seems like they see these numbers that are bonkers where ICE vehicles aren't really a thing anymore. And there's price parity amongst new energy vehicles and ICEs. And so most Chinese consumers just practically are buying NEVs.
And more pain, the Stuttgart pain and Wolfsburg
pain.
Munich pain. The Chinese brands' share of the passenger vehicle market in June, guess how high that was?
It was over 70, wasn't it?
75.5%. So only a quarter of the passenger vehicle sales are foreign brands.
Here's a green shoot or a silver lining for one of those foreign brands. Buick launched the Electra E7 in April. First full month of sales in May, they shipped over 10,000 units. The E7 is a Model Y size PHEV. So applaud GM. It's the GM SAIC joint venture, but it's a plug-in hybrid using Momenta for intelligent driving. And 10,000 units. It's a win. I'll take that as a win for GM.
One of the few good points is Buick Electra. They have the Electra sub-brand of their NEVs are actually number one among joint ventures, except SAIC GM Wuling, which they have.
They're in a different price bracket.
But interestingly enough, they're number one among the joint venture brands. I'm just looking at some of these numbers reported by CEM yesterday, thinking back to what the German automakers reported. I don't think it's even a panic button anymore. It's a survival button. It's what do you call it? A close to a death certificate button.
I completely agree, Lei. I think we're closer to, does VW continue to be a viable brand in China than we are finding a bottom, trying to right size? It's like, how do we maintain a presence in the China market? I think those are the questions the board are answering. They're not trying to say, how fast can we get new product out? It's, does our brand even resonate anymore in the China market? Those are principally different questions that need to be answered.
If you look at the last few days of launches, we had the Mercedes GLC launch the day after the ESA 5-seater launched. And then there's the Zeekr 9X 5-seater. To be honest, the
And the
Mercedes
ES8 5-seater. I think you said that?
Yeah, the Mercedes electric GLC, they're starting under RMB 300,000. Took some guts for that brand and that type of vehicle. Whereas if it was in the ICE age, it's unthinkable that they will price it under 300,000 RMB. Yet, they're stacked up against these ES8s, 9Xs, 8Xs.
You say that, Lei, but even 300,000 is still too much for that vehicle in that market.
Remember, it's Mercedes. How low can you go?
But I agree, but
Actually,
I think you and I agree.
For CEOs, if you price it in
for those wondering, right now the FX is a dollar buys me 7 RMB, 差不多?
Yeah, something like that.
So 300,000 RMB is less than 50,000 US dollars.
And then you look at these, look at the Volkswagen Group numbers reported. Their Q2 sales in China down 36.6%. The last time the downfall was this high was in the pandemic year of 2020.
It's effectively never been. Because if we take out the pandemic, it's never been this drastic.
Yeah. Porsche, less than 10,000 units sold in a quarter in China.
Wow. That just hearing you say that, I read that Porsche sales were down, but just to hear you say that is a bit unfathomable.
Mercedes Q2 in China less than 100,000 units, which is less than many of the smart EV startups sold in the same quarter. Again, how low do you go? Where is the bottom? We're not at the bottom yet. And
Leiter comes into Porsche and immediately feels pressure to perform and right the ship. Has he been to China yet since he's been CEO?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Because the transition was after the Beijing Auto Show when Oliver Blume was still the CEO, I believe.
Well, if he doesn't make his way to China at least a couple times a year, 3 times a year, I don't know how long he's going to be Porsche's CEO. So
just disastrous numbers that we're seeing, especially from the German automakers. And we already know they pointed to this. The group adjusted the guidance in early June because of China. So we knew these were going to be bad numbers. And then I posted some of the Japanese automakers, the way that their numbers have fallen over this decade.
Volkswagen had a board meeting yesterday. Rumor was they were talking about 100,000 job cuts.
Never mentioned in the press release, by the way.
The board is a weird crossroads because the board is made up of union and Lower Saxony, so municipal and government folks. They obviously don't want to see job cuts, but as I've continually said, you've continually said, they still haven't found a bottom. There's no solution to the U.S. market as long as there's 15 and 25% tariffs on the Audis and the Porsches that they ship over. Scout brand is in no man's land right now because when it launches, it's going to compete head-to-head with Rivian, who they've also written a $5 billion check to. So Bluma's strategy of try everything all at once is not working. And the other thing, and it's this New York Times article I just finished reading, they're going to reduce the number of products. And here's the thing, Lei, they're going to reduce their capacity by 3 million units. We'd mentioned this last week or 2 weeks ago. 3 million units. And let's assume there's 250,000 units per plant. And then think about all the tier 1s, tier 2s, and all the supply chain that comes along with it. 3 million units, that's, 12 plants. So let's say there's 2,500 to 3,000 people per factory. And then if you talk about up and down the supply chain, that's tens of thousands of workers potentially being laid off. So this is a significant issue in Europe as well. Mercedes, BMW, and Volkswagen Group, I feel it's bad management, but primarily due to such high exposure and reliance on the China market.
So the Volkswagen Group press release said from 12 to 9 million and 2 million is already confirmed. that 1 more million, the press release said, in China and Europe upcoming. So we talk about the sales side and we talk about the capacity side. At least from the capacity side, you can do things by shutting down or closing plants. But how much of those are going to be in China? Because what was reported from Volkswagen, less than 1 million group sales in China in the first half, which means they're going to be most likely under 2 million for the year when it used to be over 4 million. And imagine the 9 million total group sales in the first half globally was 4.13 million, which means 8 million roughly. And then we go back to the BYD discussion that we said that BYD could surpass Volkswagen without having to sell 9 or 10 million units. So there's one indication.
When does Hyundai overtake Volkswagen Group?
Right.
They're firing on all cylinders. The reliance on the U.S. market is not perfect for them in their lack of, or their inability to grow the China market for all the challenges that they have there. Despite that, they're doing gangbusters.
At least Hyundai, relatively, they don't have as much exposure to the Chinese environment because their sales volumes are already low to begin with. They rely more on other markets, but not the same for the German automakers, which means more than other foreign automakers in China, they have to face the double whammy of significant reduction in ICV sales. At the same time, their NEV product line ramp and volume are not nearly where they should be to compete.
And let me say this and be very clear. This is the saving grace for Ford. This is the saving grace for General Motors because they have less exposure to the China market. But if you look at Ford, GM, Hyundai, whoever else, Renault, Stellantis doesn't have a lot of sales coming into the China market. They need to look at two things. They need to look at the fact that you had just mentioned 50% sales drop on ICE sales in China. Number two, this competition, this 75 domestic Chinese automaker share in China, that competition is coming for them in Europe, in North America, ex-United States. You and I believe within the next 3-4 years, the Chinese are likely going to be in the United States. I hope they're preparing. I hope they are having war rooms that say, we already see 1 million units of exports coming from China, a good portion of those into the EU. We're already seeing BYD, CIC, Chery have success in the UK. But we still have 12, 14, 18 months to really, really make drastic changes. Are we doing it? Are we talking to our board to make these drastic changes? The reason I bring up the whole 50% drop in ICE sales is because we talk here in the United States, Lei, that ICE sales are going to be high for a very, very long time. The more we sell ICE in the United States, the less competitive every single automaker here is going to be globally. Full stop. Can they walk and chew gum at the same time? Because the NEVs that they launch into the market over the next 24, 36 months, they better be the best thing that they've ever produced because they will not sell outside of the United States if not. One of the things that you and I have the distinct pleasure of doing is we have a great network of people, of friends, I call them friends. And what they have to say officially, whether they work at OEMs or tier ones, what they have to say officially is what they say officially. But knowing them years and years and years, they speak candidly. At least they speak fairly candidly to me. And most of them don't have the strategies
and contacts from both sides of the coin, if you will. I mean, from the smart EV startups, from the Chinese brands, as well as the foreign brands. A lot of German brands, a lot of people that you and I know that I probably will talk to in the coming weeks. And I've never seen this kind of bloodbath ever, aside from the pandemic. And then the other thing that caught our attention is the 15th five-year plan for carbon peaking wants to have the fleet of NEVs account for 30% by 2030. At the end of 2025, that was 12%. So if you do a little bit of extrapolation, the NEV share of sales is only going to increase, probably faster than what many are expecting. And again, that's the backdrop that these foreign automakers have to face. The prospects of China has never announced any plans to stop selling ICEVs, but by 2030, right, when you only have 25% of the passenger vehicle market of the foreign automakers and the prospects of ICEVs becoming minimal, this is staring at you in front of you that you must get the NEVs right because you already don't have the ICEVs left anyways.
Let me circle back on a scenario that you had mentioned earlier about the GLC being 299,000 RMB, 300,000 RMB, but I think symbolically they announced it as 299 or something like that. So that's $45,000. The conundrum that a Mercedes and a BMW and an Audi and a Porsche have is that their pricing is being pulled down in the China market. And if something that's supposed to be premium is much lower priced in the China market, it's going to create an unevenness in Europe and the United States and anywhere else in a mature market that Mercedes sell at a premium. And a GLC might be twice as much. I won't say it won't be 70,000, but it'll land in the United States at a much higher price point than 45. And so this creates a challenge for the board as well because they're positioned as premium, but in order to compete in China, they need to be valued. And so what's the choice here? We either right size like VW and say, look, we're only going to take this much share because we want to stay at this price point, or because you can't have it both. The history has told us that BMW, the premium brands, have been able to double dip. They've been able to generate a ton of sales volume and keep margins very high. They have to pick one now. Which one are they going to pick?
The ID Era 9X, which is supposedly the star product of this next generation, next wave of in China for China products for Volkswagen brand, has surpassed the 10,000 unit sales mark. But this is more than 2 months after it launched. How do you grade that? It's not an F. It's definitely not an A, but I would have imagined that this thing has to do at least, well, maybe it's a passing grade because at least 5,000 units a month they've reached. But is that good enough?
The one thing, and I'll emphasize this, we've talked about it before, but the refresh rate for a Neo and Xpeng, Li Auto's a little bit slower. Geely, the refresh rate on their products is off the charts. And that's
which is
one of the
good
things
and bad
for the Chinese, for sure. But it's kind of the nature of the beast in China, because if you're not refreshing every 8 to 14 months, the fear is that your product becomes completely irrelevant in the market. That's why the ES8, you've heard us talking about it. And some of the features are trim changes as opposed to like complete updates to the vehicle. But nonetheless, they're constantly refreshing something. And this time around, it's a 5-seater.
Well, speaking of refreshing something, the Xiaomi Sky Nomad is definitely in that camp. It's not refreshing the seating. Well, it is refreshing the seating configuration.
What do you think about that? What do you think about the Nomad?
I don't like the name, to be honest. It's a little bit too long. Like Xiaomi sounds fun, but Sky Nomad, it just sounds weird. I know they want what it portrays. Right? Sky and Nomad means you want to go out there and wander. But the refreshing something to Xiaomi is really upping the ante in terms of what inside the car, the space can be. And when you pose something like a floor map style for a house, marketing materials, that's classic Xiaomi. And what Li Auto tried to do inside their vehicles, I think the Sky Nomad just raised it up a notch. Right?
First thought was the Zeekr Mix, because the seats rotate. I'm a little disappointed on the exterior design because it looks like every other large SUV. It's a little bit, for our audience, Western audience, it's a little bit smaller than a Chevy Tahoe. and it's a PHEV. So Xiaomi has only built BEVs up until this point. So this is a PHEV. The floor is completely flat. Or EREV, sorry. The floor is completely flat. And they've created these configurations where the second row seats can turn around. You can put a table there. And so they're trying to make it like a lounger, effectively. The exterior design looks a little bit like a Li Auto. It looks a little bit like an Ito M9. It has similar shapes if you squint. And that's one of the biggest problems or challenges for the Chinese.
Yeah.
Is that the exterior design of vehicles, a lot of them are very similar.
But if you look at the way the Chinese, especially Xiaomi, how they brought this brand to life and the series of marketing that they've done on social media channels, it's carefully planned. I mean, within the last 48 hours, I'm bombarded with these stuff on WeChat, on X, on wherever. There's something that you don't see the foreign brands do. The Mercedes launches GLC that day, the hype is a little bit and it dies. Nobody talks about it anymore. And then there's constantly about Xiaomi now, Neo, others. That's also different. It's what you're seeing happening.
Well, you tend to see a three-headed monster. You see He Xiaopeng, you see Lei Jun, and you definitely see Li Bin.
Constantly out
so
there.
Li Xiang is still behind the scenes a bit more. But, in Chinese social, it's He Xiaopeng. For Western social and Western media, it's Brian. And so it was bound to be Lei Jun's time. Stella does both. She straddles Western, and because she was at Goodwood in England, at Goodwood, to launch the Denza Z. And so we've talked about the market a bit. So let's do this. First of all, I know you and I want to congratulate Momenta on their IPO in Hong Kong, raised $1 billion or close to $1 billion at a $10 billion valuation. So they now are one of the more valuable autonomous vehicle companies, Chinese autonomous vehicle companies. And Mercedes, GM are going to be well compensated for their early investments into Momenta.
Yeah. One of the aims of me being here is actually try out a few Momenta-equipped models. I'm looking around, asking around, possibly the Ideara 9X, and also maybe the Audi E7X. And from what I'm hearing, at least from some of the media, I know that they've tested this. It's still a bit ways, obviously, from FSD, from my point of view, as a Tesla stand. Now, FSD is still kind of the crown jewel. And that's something I have to see how it is. But it is in 1 million vehicles now.
Here's one thing I brought up, Lei. No, I didn't bring it up. I should have brought it up. But one thing I was going to write something in my newsletter about it. The Momenta IPO. One of the risks I feel that they have is they're so reliant on the foreign automakers in China. And you just said it's only 25% of the market.
It is.
So that seems like a huge downside exposure for them.
It's a bet on both sides, right? It's a bet from the OEMs as well as a bet from Momenta on these OEMs.
I think it's more risky for Momenta now because each of these foreign automakers, let's just say with the exception of GM for now, every other foreign automaker that they partner with, sales are this way. So
that's a great point to bring up.
Because we know that every other Chinese automaker either has their own or are partnering with Huawei. So Momenta has nowhere to go if the foreign automakers that they partner with for the China market continue to go down.
Yeah,
we should acknowledge that. You should ask them that when you talk to them.
Right, you look at these sales, but there's other ones. There's these, even the Chinese one, the IAM, that Momenta began with 3 or 4 years ago. I wouldn't say struggling, but it's never ramped to where they expected. Obviously, there's other ones. There's BYD, there's Buick, there's Cadillac, Volkswagen, Mercedes,
Toyota,
BMW. They're all Momenta.
I thought maybe both of us did, maybe a year and a half ago during one of our shows, thought that was a virtue. I thought that was like a selling point. But now, a year later, seeing foreign automaker sales crater, I'm disappointed that there's not more fight from the foreign automakers. I'm very disappointed that there's not more fight from them.
Well, but the point is that the foreign automakers are betting on momenta to get the mojo back.
No, I don't think that at all. I think they're betting on momenta because they have no other play. I think they're trying to create relevance, not because to me, momenta is not a differentiator. It gets you in the same party. It doesn't make you a leader. It brings you to the table.
Yeah, it's just not looking positive any way you look at it.
Yeah, really.
Of really seeing that bottom, where that bottom is, how it goes in the second half of the year. Because second half of the year usually is better than the first half.
Well, the numbers are, but that's also normally, at least with the exception of middle of last year, when involution, the Chinese government was really focusing on avoiding price cuts or eliminating severe price cuts. And I did write this in the newsletter this week that I'm curious to see how many more free charging, non-price price cuts for the second half of the year are going to come into play. What creative ways are they going to incentivize Lei Xing to buy their vehicle in the second half of 2026? If I can't reduce the price, Lei, how else am I going to incentivize you?
I think in recent weeks, a month, I guess the pure price war, I think is probably dead. Would you agree? But there's other forms of ways of incentivizing. One way is to launch these 5-seaters at a little bit lower prices. That's one way to cut on the metal. And then continuing to just, we're seeing some additional new models being reported by the MIT catalog. The Sky Nomad being one of them. There's other ones. But at the same time, China just stopped the vehicle vessel tax incentive. It's not only a few hundred RMB a year, but clearly by next year, the purchase tax savings is completely gone at the end of next year. So it's just a market-based competition. There's no more subsidies, at least incentivizing. Other ways is just to add on these features, saying these features cost 70,000 RMB, but they're all standard, or we're going to have these, you can buy these at a discounted price.
They're going to move towards a Li Auto model. We have one price that gives you everything, kitchen sink.
Yeah. The Auto, I can't believe they also revealed the i9 because I also heard, I know you've heard this as well, that the L series could launch BEVs, which I find perplexing because the I series is the BEVs of the L series. There's some rumors going on, but I think the Russian doll for Li Auto is probably not sustainable going forward.
No. They should eliminate 2 of the 4, L6, L7, L8, L9. They need to eliminate 2 of them. And then they need to, at least on the i6, if we look at the ES8, that needs to be the standard now for most automakers in China for the middle size SUV. ES8 is a tremendous vehicle at the price point it's at in China. Can you think of another car right now in China? The ES8's 40-something thousand without a battery?
ES8 starts at under 300,000 RMB BAS mode. 7 for the 5-seater, 170,000. So
it's a 40 grand car.
40,000
for amazing premium. And that's just really, really hard to compete. I guess you could go with the Tong.
Well,
the Tong is bigger than the
Tong got 100,000. I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, it is. It's you and I, we live and breathe this stuff. I think you and I have encyclopedic knowledge of the China market. No one can beat us. But even you and I are like, man, I get confused, man. There's so much news, pricing changes. And then there's the Tong, there's the Da Tong, and the 26 version versus the 27 version. There's mega charging. CATL has it. BYD has it. It's just like, whoa, God. And we can close it out. Stellantis is bringing the Topolino to the United States, $14,000 car. Well, so it made me think of the Microlino guys in Switzerland, where the door opens from the front. They've been wanting to sell that in the United States. And then shout out to Stella, who's in England, to show off the Denza Z. What do you think of that car?
I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the design, but the way that it's been reported as a 911 fighter, and it costing £150,000 over one.
It's starting at around 190 USD.
Yeah.
So it should begin delivery end of this year. Obviously, they've launched it in the UK, so it's going to be right-hand drive.
So what I'm saying is the BYD has the guts to price that vehicle at that much of a price, whereas the Mercedes don't have the guts anymore.
Well, but they have data that backs up if they premium price. Yeah. It's going to not work. I think for BYD, they're just feeling their way out. What does the market think?
I think it's just
I don't think that
of BYD a little bit that we can do this, we're going to do this. Whereas the traditional foreign, the premiums, they're kind of forced. They don't want to do this. Price it under, but we have to do this. That's the steering.
So, how's being back?
Oh, it's great. I haven't done much except the first week is just settling down because I don't have the apartment anymore, and then just visiting my daughter's friends and relatives and family. I did go to the Nanluo Guxiang.
Okay.
It was daddy duty a couple of days ago, and I took my daughter and her friends, and we went full Jensen. We got the bean, the jjiangmian, and then we got the fermented bean juice. It's a Lao Beijing.
You went to the same place? You went to the same places?
The same place. And now they have the Jensen menu, the Jensen Huang menu, the power of Jensen Huang. I couldn't,
So for those wondering, Nanluo Guxiang in Beijing is like a tourist area, and it's known for selling instruments as well. Musical instruments. And how else would you describe Nanluo Guxiang?
The Nixue Bingcheng, the drinks place.
Yeah, it's like hutongs.
Yeah,
and there's cool little bars.
Very
cool
crowded
bars.
And then went to Sanlitun the other day. A lot of people in Nike, Adidas stores buying World Cup stuff. Because World Cup is still going on, right? So
even though China is not in the World Cup. So but let's end it on this. I haven't looked at the bracket, so I don't know. So if I'm wrong, please forgive me. I see France, Argentina in the final. What do you think?
Same here. But I guess people want Norway or England.
Well, Holland is
a lot of fans, Chinese fans of Holland.
For some reason on my ex, his stuff has really jumped onto my feed. Yeah, I like him, man. He's 6'5", fast, and anyways, the one cool thing, Lei, about the World Cup in the United States is all these other videos of Germans, of Italians, of Scottish, like loving American culture, loving American food. It makes me for all the challenges the United States has, it's a great place. It's still a great place. Obviously,
but relating to the economy, I haven't seen that much. But the numbers tell a story, right? At least we saw the numbers from CAM, CPCA, saw the numbers from National Bureau of Statistics. But going to the shopping places, food, eating, it's still, I don't see, that maybe it's just what people consume matters, but
still here, it's pretty challenging there, but maybe you see it more in the lower tier cities, in some of the manufacturing hubs and stuff. But I don't think there's a short-term fix for reigniting the Chinese economy. I think the base is too large now, and trying to get to 5% growth is going to be pretty challenging for the Chinese government, but who knows?
And we know
cool, man.
Yeah, we know the auto industry is a huge part of it.
It's just less than 12 or 13% or something like that. So yeah, man, I know that you're going to have some fun in Munich next week. Unfortunately, I cannot go. Have too much going on here. So you'll report from Munich next week for Xpeng's event?
So Xpeng is launching, well, they've already showed the L3 the day I arrived, but they're doing a global launch of they're calling it Mona L03 in China, but just the Xpeng L03 outside of China.
Right.
They're having a global launch event, and it's their biggest event this year, even bigger than the Beijing Auto Show. So that tells you something.
The other thing, too, is that Li Auto is launching a vehicle on the same day.
L6, the updated L6.
Yes. So, cool, man. All right, dude. Enjoy the weekend. Is it pretty hot there?
It's very rainy because of the typhoon Bavi. It's been raining every day almost since I've arrived. Hot, yes. Much hotter.
Cool. Everyone, thanks for joining us. We will talk with you all in a week. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Li, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at Lei Xing 77. That's LEIXING 77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China EVs and more.